Shalom to everyone, Shavua Tov, and we can still say Chodesh Tov, and I want to thank Rabbanit Ice and the entire Nishmat Beit Midrash, and all those who have joined us for 24 hours of Torah, Me'afela La'ora, to strengthen the soul of Am Yisrael, both mine and yours, as we share the Koach HaTorah. I feel that, albeit some are naming this war Milchemet Charvot Barzel, the Iron Sword, and others are calling it the Simchat Torah War, both of which unfortunately diminish the simcha of the day, leaving a lasting impression of sadness. But me'afela la'ora, we have to think onward, and therefore, not just during these 24 hours of Torah, but the hope is that through this milchama, through this national war that we're fighting on all fronts, we will be zochet be'ezrat Hashem to see Milchemet Mashiv Haruach Omorid Hagashem. Today in Eretz Yisrael, there have been pouring rains that remind us of when this war began, when we mentioned Gvurot Geshamim. And this really is the time for Mashiv Haruach. This is the time to pay attention to the restoration of spirit, not only because it began on the day that we started to recite Mashiv Haruach Omorid Hagashem in our daily Amidah, but also because this entire time period of Chanukat is meant, as we know, to serve as a continuation of Sukkot. This whole time period is meant to strengthen, in fact, our Chalomot and remind us of the Nivuot that we ultimately are supposed to appreciate during this time. And I'm going to share then some of the Mekorot to better appreciate. There we go. To better appreciate the Nitzachon and the restoration, really, of this Ruach. So let's begin with this week's Parsha, with Parshat Vayetze, where we hear about Yaakov's dreams. Yaakov, if you remember, leaving Beersheba on his way to Haran, and he literally is going to encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We begin in Pasuk Yud Bet, Vayachalom Shamayim, V'hinei Malachei Elohim Olim V'yordim Bo. V'hinei Hashem nitzav alav, Vayomer Ani Hashem Elokei Avram Avicha V'Elokei Yitzchak Ha'aretz Asher Ata Shochev Alaha Lacha Etznena Ulezaracha. Yaakov is promised the same haftachot, the brit, the shvua, the oath of the land and of the nation. Vayazaracha kafar haaretz uparatz vayama v'kema b'tzafoma v'nedba v'neverchu b'cha kol mishpachot ha'adama u'v'zaracha. In Yaakov's dream, he hears HaKadosh Baruch Hu reassuring him, albeit ironically, he's leaving the land of Eretz Yisrael right now, but Hashem assures him that in fact, he's going to return. And I'm sure many of you are thinking and feeling this, that albeit with the oppression and with all the literally the dark news that we're hearing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is granting us chizuk in every single parsha. Each one of these parshiot of the Torah, from Simchas Torah, from Parshat Bereshis, from the Or versus the Choshech, to the eradication of Hamas in Parshat Noach, to the endless call of Lech Lecha Me'artzacha, through the Pidyon Shvuyim of Lech Lecha, and then the Akedah of children in Parshat Vayera, and the legacy of Sarai Meno and Chaye Sarah. Vayetze reminds us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says not to worry. Even when it appears as if you're in danger, lo ezavcha, I'm not leaving you. And sure enough, Yaakov wakes up and says, even when it's not always apparent to us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu ultimately is there, and he realizes that there's such potential here, that everyone thinks that Bavel is the Bava of Kel, that Mesopotamia is the gateway to heaven. But no, they have it all wrong. It's right here in Eretz Yisrael. Vayashkim Yaakov baboker, and what does Yaakov do when he wakes up in the morning? Vayikach et ha'evan asher sam mirashotav, vayasem otam matzeva, vayitzok shemen al rosha. Yaakov creates a diorama of his dream. He doesn't want to forget this dream. He wants to ensure that it's going to be solidified for posterity. So he creates literally a model of the dream with the Eben, like the Sulam, Asher Sam Mirashotav, with the Rosh Magia Mutzah, and Shemen representing Hashem Arosha. And the Rambam, as many other Parshanim, explains, this isn't just Yaakov's particular dream. Rather, the Torah here is depicting the details of Yaakov's dream to tell us that this is man's eternal dream. And albeit Avimelech is the first character in Tanakh of whom we hear that he dreams, this is the first dream where we hear the content of the Chalom. And now the Rambam tells us, what is it that Yaakov's dreaming of? What is it that a dream ultimately is? It's an expression of one's aspiration. And Yaakov is aspiring to spiritual heights. V'hinei Hashem nitzav alav. What is he striving for? Chayam omed alav. The Rambam, who dismisses any anthropomorphic features of God, says, don't think that God is literally standing on top of the ladder. Rather, he exists al hasulam, meaning God exists in a transcendental form in Shamayim, the katzeo hacharon ba'aretz. But God is also immanent in this world. And what does man wish? Like Yaakov Avinu, to be able to climb the rungs of the ladder, uvo ya'aleh, kol mi sheya'aleh, so that whoever wants to can get up and, in fact, go up the rungs of the ladder ad sheyasig mi sha'alav behechrech, until he reaches he that is atop of the ladder. Achar shehu omed kayam al rosh hasulam. He's striving for spiritual heights. Umevuarhu shemamare hinei alav hu kvize hamashal hanasu. And what is he ultimately dreaming of? He sees malachei elokim olim v'yordim. He's not dreaming of celestial angels, which, according to the Rambam, also don't have any corporeality. Rather, he's dreaming of himself, of rising up the rungs of the ladder of Ruchniut, rising to attain understanding of the messages of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like the conventional term of Malach in the literature of Nevi'im, as a messenger of Hashem, mortal man, who starts off here, Olim. First, the Malachim are going up. We start off here, Ba'aretz. These are the Nevi'im, who so badly want to experience Nevuah, who want to communicate with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and understand divine messages. He says, that's what I'm striving for. I so wish that I could be Zoche, that I can merit Nevuah, that I can merit prophecy. And what's the beauty? Yaakov is dreaming about the possibility of achieving Nevuah. And then what do you know? V'hinei Hashem nitzav alav, vayomer ani Hashem. Yaakov, in fact, merits to receive Nevuah as he's dreaming about that possibility. And then the goal of a Navi is to hear the message of Hashem and then articulate, deliver that message down here on the bottom of the ladder. In a very similar vein, the Nefesh HaChaim, Reb Chaim Mivolozhin, explains that this really is the universal dream of man. But instead of man striving to leave this mortal world and striving up above for Shamayim, just so that he can come back and infuse this mortal physical world with the messages of Hashem, he says ultimately the source is really Shamayim. He says it's mutzav, not ba'aretz. The ladder never really is rooted in the ground, but rather artza. It's going towards the ground. Man dreams as an expression of his neshama. The source of the neshama, the ikar sharasho b'shamayim, is in the heavens. And as the neshama, as we know, travels from the celestial spheres down below, v'yoreid, almost, ala aretz yagia. But the neshama doesn't want to be confined by the earthly restraints. And therefore, the neshama strives. Hu hanishmat chayim shel adam shemetatzelet kiviyachol minishmat pivit barach shemo. The neshama really is connected always to the shamayim, umitkasheret im haruach, and all the different components of the neshama. This is man who's always striving, like Yaakov Avinu, to remind ourselves that we have to sometimes shed the physical components of this world as we strive to get higher and higher in the celestial spheres, in spiritual heights. So notice the common denominator between the Rambam and Reb Chaim Mivolozhin. They're both expressive of Yaakov, and for that matter, teaching us that our dreams really should be dreams of seeking levels of ruchniut, of trying to get closer as we can to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're expressions of our spiritual aspirations. But the Gemara tells us that not always. As a matter of fact, the Gemara tells us that Yaakov is also dreaming of his own fears and anxieties, keeping in mind, this is way before Freud, that when we experience anxieties in our own lives, and in the case of Yaakov Avinu running away from his bloodthirsty brother Esav, of course, he's afraid. He feels endangered. And therefore, what's he dreaming of? He's dreaming of these malachim, literal angels of God, who are going up, and they see Hashem nitzav alav, that Hashem is on the heavenly corner of the ladder. Hashem is above the ladder, and then they go down the ladder and they see Yaakov there. And as the malachim and various midrashim, as we know, are very protective of the celestial sphere, of the heavenly domain. Am Yisrael shouldn't receive the Torah, and a man shouldn't get the gift of Shabbat, and a man is going to corrupt truth in this world. So to hear, they're wondering, why should there be this line? Why should there be a ladder? Why should there be a connection between God, between HaKadosh Baruch Hu, immortal physical man, Ba'u L'Sachune? So ultimately, they wanted to endanger Yaakov, and Yaakov is dreaming about this. He's dreaming about the malachim going up and down, wanting to endanger him, but then he sees V'nei Hashem nitzan alav. He sees Hashem literally standing on top, not of the ladder, but of him. Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish, that yes, the Torah is actually saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is hovering over Yaakov Avinu and protecting Yaakov. Our dreams are also expressions of our anxieties, of our fears, and especially when there is what to fear, we're anxious. And in our dreams, those anxieties look so real, but Yaakov is reminded of the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even in his nightmares, even in these dreams, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is protecting him. So now we've seen the nature of dreams. But Chazal tell us that it's not really the dream in as much as the dreamer who affects the dream. As a matter of fact, Chazal, based on a pasuk in Mishlei, Yirat Hashem l'chaim, someone who fears Hashem, he'll live a long life, v'savea yalin, and he'll go to sleep very satisfied, bal yapaked ra, no evil will befall him. A beautiful tikbolet mashlima, a parallelism that continues the rewards of Yirat Hashem, of someone who fears God. But the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yonah, Amar Rabbi Zera, you can read it differently. Read it not as a complementary pasuk, but actually as a tikbolet nigudit, as an antithesis. Yirat Hashem, someone who fears God, l'chaim. He'll live a good, wonderful life. B'savea yalin, but someone who isn't striving, someone who feels content when he goes to sleep, or as Chazal say, don't read it, savea ela sheva, someone who's able to go to sleep for 7 days, bal yipaked, without being remembered with a dream, ra, he's considered evil. I always say that during this time, it's recruitment season for many midrashot, that maybe what we should really ask students, if we want to see if they're going to gain the maximum of a year of Torah learning, is not look at their transcripts, but simply ask them, so have you had a dream in the past 7 days? Do you dream? Do you have goals? Are you aspiring to move beyond the status quo? I hope you're not content with where you are right now with mediocrity, because then you're never going to strive for more. Chazal say that in order to have a dream, you have to be a dreamer. You have to be someone who really envisions improving things. And therefore, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, the way that you go to sleep will determine what type of night you have. The way that you live your life prepares you for how you dream and what you dream and if you dream, so that we know that our REM and RAM processing is taking place at night as well. Just as if you know you have to wake up very early in the morning. So even without an alarm clock, there's something in our subconscious that enables us to wake up. It's not just about when we're sleeping and what we're dreaming about. It's the consciousness that we have when we go to sleep. Do we want to dream? I want to have a dream? Do I want to change the world? Do we want to be okay with where we are, or what are we going to do now to take advantage of this situation of Mashif HaRuach? Are we going to dream about climbing the rungs of a ladder towards a greater relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Are we going to strive to be in touch more with our neshama, with our spirits? That's based on how we go to sleep, what we do even during the day. And therefore, the Gemara says, in the name of Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar Rabbi Yonatan, Ein marin lo l'adam ela mehu reili bo, way before Freud, that man dreams of really what's in his subconscious. That our subconscious tells us a lot about what our visions are, what our trajectory in life is all about. And we see this when Rashi tells us that not only when Yaakov came to Beit El does he daven Tfilat Arvit, but then what does he do? He takes the Avanim that are around him, Vayaseh Mirashotav, and he puts them under his head. Explains Rashi, Asa'an Kamin Marzev. He made them like a siege, Saviv L'Rosho, around his head, Sheyarei Mipnei Chayot Ra'ot, because he's afraid of wild animals. And then he continues the famous Midrash of Achdut, that they all wanted to be under the head of a tzaddik. And each one said, no, he should be on top of me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made them all as one, because they all ultimately want to share in this wonderful merit. But it's interesting that Rashi says that Yaakov is afraid of wild animals, so he places the stones around his head. One should argue, if he's so scared of wild animals, then really he should be placing the stones not around his head, but around his entire body. Here we see that what is he most afraid of? He's most afraid of his head. He's most afraid that the wild animals, and for that matter, all the dangers, all the external influences, are going to have an effect on his head. They're going to have an effect on his thoughts. They're going to have an effect on his dreams. And he doesn't want to lose sight of his dreams. No matter what, he wants to make sure that he's in touch with those dreams and that he's able to pursue those dreams, which is why it's significant then to appreciate that certainly the dreamer who influences his dreams, but then it's going to be the dream that will also enable the dreamer to then affect reality. And this is clearly manifest in the dreams, not only the dreams of Yosef. He has to see and remind himself never to forget his dreams of success and providing his brothers with food, literally with wheat. And perhaps even greater do we see this in Yosef's interpretations of the very similar dreams of the Sar HaMashkim and the Sar HaOfim, the butler and the baker. If you remember, they really dream in a very similar manner. But Yosef is able to appreciate that these are different dreams, because each one of the dreamers is dreaming of a different reality. The Sar HaMashkim sees Gefen Lefanai. He's in his dream. And in that Geffen, in the dream, he sees a vine that is not only blossoming, but he sees himself, Pasuk Yud Aleph, the kos paro biadi. He sees himself with a goblet of paro, and he sees himself taking the grapes, ve'kachet hanavim ve'eschatotan el kos paro, and he sees himself literally squeezing them into Paro's goblet, ve'tina takos kaf paro. And Yosef says, then I know what it means. It means that in 3 more days, Paro is going to restore you to your position. So then the Sar HaOfim, the baker, recognizing that he has also dreamt a very similar dream, says, okay, I'm going to share my dream with Yosef. And he says, Af ani b'chalumi, I was also in my dream, and I saw shlosha salei chorei al roshi. I also saw 3 baskets on my head. And in the top basket, there were all different baked goods, and the birds are consuming them from the top of my head. And Yosef says, well, those 3 baskets, like the 3 branches of the vine, that's also 3 days. But for you, the baker, it means that Yisa Paro Eshrot Shcha. Paro is going to behead you. V'talo otcha al eitz. Paro is going to kill you, and the birds are going to be consuming your flesh. And the question is obviously, why offer such a different interpretation? But if you look carefully, it's about how the Sar HaMashkim dreams. He dreams that he's active. He dreams, and he can really envision that he's back at his post. And Yosef says, that's how you dream. And that means that you've never given up on that vision. You've never given up on that possibility. Yes, that's what's going to happen. That means that you never lost hope. As opposed to the baker is passive in his dream, and therefore Yosef knows that deep down, he's already given up. He's already hopeless. And he says, I hate to tell you this, then you've never really even pictured yourself back in your position. And therefore, you didn't aspire, and you're never going to reach that position. Which is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, in the midst of oppression and persecution in Egypt, go and tell Bnei Yisrael, Pakol pakatiti etchem. Don't worry, they'll understand this. Pasuk Yudchet v'shamu l'kolecha. Moshe, use these magic words, Pakol pakatiti, and they'll listen to you. They'll start believing you. And Rashi says, why is that? What's so special about this code word? Shekfar siman ze masur bi'adam Yaakov, to teach you that it's been hundreds of years, but they never forgot these words. They never forgot the dreams, the destiny, the shvuot, the britot of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov. And that's why Yaakov and Yosef both incorporate the term Bakod Yivkod Elokim Etchem. So that when Am Yisrael, hundreds of years later, are going to hear Moshe Rabbeinu employing this terminology of pakot pakadati, they're going to know, wait a second, we've dreamt about these words. We've dreamt. We still have it in the echoes of our hearts and minds. We know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to remember us, teaching us that we can't stop dreaming, because stopping to dream means that we give up on those hopes. Od lo avda tikvatenu. This is the time, the month of Kislev, the winter solstice. This is the time of the longest nights, the greatest darkness, but the greatest time to dream. This is when we hear parsha after parsha of dreams and more dreams, starting this week's parsha. This is a time of miracles. It's the time of dreams. And it's the time that we're meant to be affected by our dreams, which we see the Midrash tells us as well. That Yaakov isn't just dreaming of his aspirations, and he isn't just dreaming of his anxieties. In his dream, he recognizes his own fears, the potential, but at the same time, what's holding him back. The Midrash Tanchuma tells us that Yaakov saw Malachei Elokim olim v'yordimbo Amar Shmuel bar Nachman elo sarei umot ha'akum. He saw the different representatives of the various nations, and he saw Heralo HaKadosh Baruch Hu at Lavinu Yaakov Sarashal Baba Lola Shivin Ukin Boto and Avioraid Avishal Madzai Chamishimushnayim Vishal Yavan Mea Avioraid. He saw the Babylonian Empire rising for 70 years and falling, and then the Median and the Persian Empire for 52 years rising and falling, and the 100 years of the Greek Empire rising and falling, and then he saw the Roman Empire. Shel Edom, the galut that we still find ourselves in, v'lo yada kama, and he doesn't see that they're coming down. And he tells himself, maybe Shema in Yerida, maybe Edom is never going to come down. And keep in mind that that's his brother, so he's afraid. Maybe ultimately Esav's brachot really are going to be stronger than mine. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no, ata al tirav di Yaakov, al techat Yisrael. No, don't worry. Even Edom, ani morido. The higher up he goes, im tagvia kanesher ben kol chavim simkanecha misham oritzchanum Hashem. Don't worry, I'm going to take him down as one is going to take the bird down from his nest. Amar Rab Barachia b'shem Rabbi Chalbo, Rabbi Shimon ben Yosina. Malamed Sharo HaKadosh Baruch Hu liyaka b'vinu sarasha bavel olevi yored shel Madai olevi yored shel Yavan olevi yored shel Edom olevi yored. He saw all the different galiot. He saw all the different enemies of Am Yisrael succeeding, but then ultimately falling and failing. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu liyakov, Yaakov, lama ein ata ole? Okay, Yaakov, now it's your turn. Go up. Boto Yaakov, the Midrash tells us that at that moment Yaakov was too scared. In his dream, he saw himself as too scared. What was he afraid of? That if he goes up, just like the others before him, he's also going to fall. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no, Yaakov. Yaakov, if you go up, you're never going to fall. V'lo hemin v'lo Allah. And Yaakov didn't believe. It's hard to imagine that he didn't believe HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rather, he didn't believe in himself. He didn't believe that he really could do this. He didn't believe that he could really succeed, that he could be a world empire, and therefore, lo Allah. Rabbi Shimon ben Yosina says, so chaval that he didn't have sufficient emunah. Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ilo alita vehemanta. Had you only gone up and had that sufficient belief, lo hayta lacha yerida la'olam, then you would have stayed atop there for a very long time. But because you didn't have that belief in yourself, in your dream, Yaakov, they're going to suffer misim and arnoniot and galiot. And notice something so phenomenal. Sometimes in our dreams, we see our anxieties, our fears, and we don't necessarily respond the way that we'd like to respond in our dreams. But our dreams should still inspire us to affect the reality. It could be that in his dream, Yaakov doesn't get up and doesn't climb that ladder. He only sees the other malachim going up. But Rashi says, but the next morning, he's exhilarated. He realizes that he does have that potential. And therefore, when he begins the process that ultimately is going to bring him back to Eretz Yisrael, to starting a nation, Vayisa Yaakov Raglav, it doesn't just say Vayelach Yaakov. It says he literally lifts his feet up. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised him that he would guard him, Nasali Boet Raglav. His heart literally lifted up his feet. In other words, that even though in his dream he couldn't get up, the next morning he affected reality. He was invigorated. He was exhilarated. He was able to get up and to move forward. And therefore, the Medrash explains it's really not the Chalomot, lo ma'alin v'lo moridin. It's not the content of our dreams that really brings us up or brings us down. It's not whether you have a good dream or a bad dream per se. Rather, it's about how do you respond to the dream? What do you dream about? So I'm going to share with you personally that during these difficult times with 3 of our sons and 6 of our nephews and so many of our neighbors and our community's children and our nation's sons in Gaza right now, and all with their anxieties. Of course, we have those dreams, those deliberations, those fears, those subconscious anxieties, as Yaakov Avinu does. And sometimes we go there, and in our dreams, they can be very consuming. And sometimes we can respond simply by crying and by being passive. And Yaakov Avinu tells us, no, get up and realize that this is the beginning of something wonderful, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu isn't going to leave us. And instead realize that we can truly invigorate ourselves. We can, together with everyone, nisa levavenu et raglenu, and we can pull ourselves forward and see not just the beginning, but the continuation of the fulfillment of our national dreams, which is why the Meshech Chochmah tells us there are 2 ways of responding to dreams. There's a way of responding like Yaakov Avinu. He has a dream and he gets up and he goes and he starts to fulfill that dream, even if there are going to be difficult obstacles along the way. But take a look at Lavan. At the end of the parsha, if you remember, Yaakov is already on his way back from Lavan to Eretz Yisrael, and Lavan has a dream. God appears to Lavan and says, don't do any evil, and imra v'im tov, don't withhold Yaakov Avinu. And Lavan gets up in the morning and he kisses his grandchildren goodbye. And he gives them a bracha. He just had a dream, a divine dream. And what does he do? He goes back to where he was before, completely unaffected, just like Bilam. Bilam witnessed Balak and God's intervention, but Vayakam Bilam, Vayelach Vayashav Limkomo. The Meshech Chochmah says, Yaakov halach lidarko. A real tzaddik, a Talmid Chacham ha'amiti, never goes back, is never Vayashav Limkomo, never goes back to where he was before after a dream. His life should be changed. We've all seen nightmares before our eyes. Our lives can't be the same. Do we go back to where we were before? People are talking about, okay, when is life going to go back to normal? I don't want to go back to normal. Do you want to go back to normal? We shouldn't go back to normal. We want to go b'darko, lema'alot dolot, to start climbing the rungs of the ladder, to realize that this is an opportunity to climb, to run, to work, to build, to bring us to the next stage of the fulfillment of the promises of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And just to see this all the more, to understand a little bit more of the nature of dreams during this time, we remember Choni HaMagel. Do you remember him in this rainy season? When we remember Masechet Tan, it's this time period of not only mentioning Mashif Aruch Amor Dagashem, the power of God to provide for winds and rains, but also the Berchat Hashanim. We also ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for Geshamim, because we need it for the crops. Albeit we ask Hashem to protect the soldiers during this time, to use the rains to divulge all the entrances of the Hamas tunnels. At the same time, we know that Choni, when there wasn't sufficient rain by the end of the season, he turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Agugav Amad B'tocha, and it tells Hashem, come on, Amma ben Bayit, Hashem bring rains. And at first there are little droplets of rain, and Choni says, that's not good enough, buckets of rain. Hashem, this isn't what I asked for. And immediately he asked, Hashem, come on, Gishmei Bracha. Hashem brings Gishmei Bracha, beautiful rains. And as soon as there is enough, he asks Hashem to stop, and the sun starts shining. And Shimon ben Shatzach says, this isn't the way things work. Yes, Choni, I know that you see yourself as a Navi with direct communication to God. Whatever you ask for, you receive. But really, the way that we procure rain is through tefillah and tanit. It's a process. We're not always going to see the immediate answers to our tefillah, to our bakashot right away. And that's why Choni doesn't understand, says Rabbi Yochanan, he doesn't understand the famous pasuk, Shir HaMalot b'Shem Hashem et Shabbat Zion, Hayinu Kochomim, that when we came back to Zion, we were like dreamers. He says, what does that mean? We all know that we don't dream for a very long time at all. That even though we can dream about numerous events, most dreams don't last more than a few minutes at a time. So what does that mean that when we came back after 70 years, we were like dreamers? A dream is never 70 years. Choni is upset and frustrated. Why did Galut, why did the return from exile have to take 70 years until one day, Yom Echad, Have Azab Orcha, he walks and he sees Chazei Lahu Gavra Have Nata Charuva. He sees a man planting a charuv, and it's not just any tree. It's a carob tree, which in Hebrew is charuv, which comes from the word of chorban. He sees a man planting from destruction. And in fact, he asks him, Amar lehai, ad kama shnina te'in, how long is it going to take until the tree bears fruit? Amar le ad shivin shnin, it takes 70 years. And even though I Googled this, and really on average, a carob tree takes around 13 to 14 years, nonetheless, and here it's a mashal for the galut. It takes 70 years to come out, to bear the fruits of chorban. And therefore, Choni says, so you think do you think it's so simple that you're going to be around in 70 years? In other words, why would you plan something for a process that's going to take 70 years? And Ahai Gabra, the man answers him, Alma b'charuba ishkachti, because I came into this world with a charuf, because I'm the child of Holocaust survivors, because I was born into a world of chorban that my parents have planted for me. And I want to plant Tishtalte Le'abate, Shatli Nami Labari. I want to plant something for my children. I want to plant from chorban so that they can live a better life. Yativ, in the meantime, Choni sits down, Karech Rifta, sleep falls him. And sure enough, he sleeps for 70 years. Nim Shivin Shnin, Kigam Chaze Elahu Gavra. When he gets up, he sees a man who is picking the fruits of the tree, and he says, Atu Dishtalte? In Choni's mind, it should happen so quickly. Are you the one who planted it? He says, no, I'm the grandson. And Choni realizes, wow, I've been sleeping for 70 years. While this man's been planting, while this man's been plowing, while this man's been watering and investing in the tree, and now eating the fruits of the next generation, being able to eat the fruits from chorban, Choni's been sleeping, Choni's been passive. And he goes back home and he realizes that his son isn't around, his grandson's around, and no one believes that he's Choni. So he goes to the base midrash and he overhears them saying, in the times of Choni, Kol kushia dahavik lahu Rabbanan havi mefarak lahu. In the days of Choni, everything was so clear. You could come with the most difficult question and he would solve everything for you. And Choni says, Ananihu, that's me. And they don't believe him. Basically, Choni can't relate to a process, can't relate to. For him, it's the here and the now. And what Rabbi Yochanan is teaching us is that a dream is a process. That you dream and it can take 70 years, but not if you sleep through your dreams. Not if you're passive like Choni. The dream is supposed to motivate you to change around the world of Chorban. What we're experiencing now is supposed to motivate us to dream, to be able to see as a rebuilt as a Gan Eden, to be able to see Am Yisrael secure in our land, to be able to see our children, our grandchildren, Be'ezrat Hashem, unified as one nation. That's the dream that we're supposed to be reminded of during this time. And that ultimately is part of this season of dreaming, which reminds us of the Nivuot, the prophecies as well, that we can never lose sight of. This is a war of Mashif HaRuach, of restoring the Ruach, restoring the spirit of our dreams and the spirit of our prophecies. The Gemara, if you remember, Mesachet Shabbat says, My Chanukah. What is the Nes of Chanukah? We celebrate for 8 days, starting from Chafei Kislev, to remind ourselves that כשנכנסו יוונים להיכל צימו כל השמנים שבהיכל, כשגבר מלכות בית חשמונאי וניצחום בדקו ולא מצאו על הפח אחד של שמן שהיה מונח בחותמו של כהן גדול ולא היה בו אלא להדליק יום אחד, נעשה בו נס והדליק ממנו 8 ימים. לשנה אחרת באום בצום ימים טובים בהלל והודאה. The beautiful Braita here teaches us that we celebrate Chanukat with lighting the menorah for 8 days to remember that the oil that should have only lasted 1 day, the Nes Pachshemen, lasted 8 days. But it doesn't really explain why we celebrate on the 25th of Kislev. It doesn't really explain why we celebrate specifically with the menorah for these 8 days. So the Megillah Tanit, the Tanaitic work with the Greek Perush called the Scholiona, explains all the more that really the point of having these 8 days is that when they came back, it wasn't just about lighting the menorah. They literally were rededicating the Beit HaMikdash that had become defiled. First, they had to rebuild the Mizbeach, and then they celebrated the rededication of the temple of the Beit HaMikdash for the next 7 days. And when they came back, they wanted to show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they are so grateful for the military victory. So what did they do? This is what I picture they're going to do in Azal. All the soldiers, they're not necessarily going to have their nice, aquarium, chanukiot. So what they're going to take the caskets of the bombs of Hamas, and they're going to create, just like the Chashmonaim, beautiful shipudim. They're going to create a makeshift menorah, and they're going to light it like Chabad all over Gaza. We're going to see pictures all over social media in order to show that, yes, Hashem, we recognize, as the Maharal says, that this military victory is really miraculous, really comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But we still don't have an answer as to why did they come Dafka Chaf Hei Kislev. After all, in Megillah Tanit, we also hear that on the 3rd of Tishrei, they already started to reverse the decrees of the Seleucids. At the beginning of the month of Kislev, they had already cleaned out the Beis HaMikdash. So why did Yehuda HaMaccabim and the Chashmonaim, why did they wait to rededicate the Beis HaMikdash till Chaf Hei Kislev? Why not Tet Vav, the middle of the month? Why not Rosh Chodesh? Why Dafka Chaf Hei? In order to appreciate this, we have to remember that they were reminded of the Nevuot of Chagai. Close to 350 years before their time, Chagai comes to them, what do you know, on Rosh Chodesh Elul, and he tells them that Hashem wants you to start rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash, that it's time to resettle Eretz Yisrael. While the people are saying, Lo et boed Beit Hashem libanot, they came back in 535 BC with the proclamation of Koresh, so enthused to start the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, but they were unsuccessful, and they thought, okay, it must be that the Nevuot of Yirmiyahu have expired. And Chagai comes and he says, no, look around. The Nevuah hasn't expired. Look at the resettlement of Eretz Yisrael. This is a fulfillment of the Nevuot of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All you have to do now is continue in the process. Come on, keep building. And he tells them by the end of the month, don't be depressed. Even when it seems that you're moving backwards, come on, Ruach Hashem. He says, by Hashem et Ruach Zerubbabel. And by the end of the month of Elul, they're starting to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. But what do you know? Lo and behold, Erev of Shmini Atzeret on Hoshana Rabbah. Chagai reminds them, don't lose hope. Come on, you can do this. You can do it. Even if it looks like you're just building a makeshift Beis HaMikdash, in the end, this Beis HaMikdash is going to be beautiful because Mashiach HaRuach Hashem is going to restore. Hashem's spirit is here. And lo and behold, he comes to them again on the 24th of Chi'i, on the 24th of Kislev. And he calls this day Yom Yusad Heichal Hashem. Today's the day that we're going to start build. Chaf Dalet Kislev, we're going to start the foundation of Heichal Hashem of the Beis HaMikdash. And this is the day he tells the political leaders, Ruvavel ben Shaltiel, the religious leader, Yehoshua ben Yotzadak, you're going to see amazing things happening. You're going to see apocalyptic phenomena. You're going to see that all the terrorists are going to be destroyed. You're going to see that I'm going to turn tanks over. Then you're going to see the reestablishment of monarchy and government. And now we understand that albeit Zerubbabel did not initiate war against the Persians during his time, but Yehuda Maccabi remembers this nevuah, and it's been resounding in the hearts and minds, in the dreams of Am Yisrael, even after the expiration of the time period of prophecy. They remember this. And therefore, when they go and they wage war against the Seleucid Greeks and they see a miraculous victory, they realize, wow, this is the fulfillment of Nevuat Chagai, that we have now finally fulfilled this prophecy. And therefore, to show this, they come specifically and they are going to inaugurate the Mizbeach on the same day that Chagai came to inaugurate the Mizbeach, which we know is the same day we find in Sefer HaMakkabim, the same day, B'yom HaChamishi, V'esrim l'chodesh HaTshi'i Hu Kislev, V'yechanchu et HaMizbeach B'etzam Hayom Asher Timoto HaGoyim, the same day that Antiochus Epiphanes came and defiled it, to show on the anniversary of its establishment, he's going to come and destroy it. Comes along Yehuda Maccabi and says, we're going to rebuild it. We're going to show that this is a fulfillment of our nevuot, and we didn't forget about this. And to show that we even believe that nevuah is going to be restored, the Navi is going to tell us what we should do with the broken ruins of this mizbeach that has been defiled. And now we understand why Chagai came and delivered this nevuah on Chaf Daled Kislev, because as we know, the Gemara tells us that this is the darkest time of the year. This is not only the earliest Shabbos, the time of the earliest Shabbosim, this is a time of the longest nights. We're in the middle of a really long night of dark times. Chagai comes, and just like Adam Harishon, who during this time thought it must be that Hashem is going to restore the world to Tohu Vabohu, he sat and he davened for 8 days until finally by the end of these 8 days, he saw that the day was getting a little longer. Shabbos was coming in just a little later. And he realized, oh, it's just minhago shel olam. Chagai comes in the darkest of times and says, this is a time for you to remember the Ruach of Hashem. This is a time, I know it seems so dark, Am Yisrael, but don't forget that Hashem is in your midst. Me'afela liora. I guarantee during these dark times, anyone who's staying up all night is going to see, we're going to go from darkness, you're going to see the or, you're going to see v'yaraucha mishemesh, you're going to see, we're all going to see the beautiful light, the sunrise, the geula that's yet to come. And that's exactly what the Yehudim were privy to in the Nes of Chanukat, showing that during these darkest times, we light up the night. Yes, during this festival of light, we don't lose hope, but we know that we're going to see the Ruach, and to prove it, the Chashmonaim light the menorah. More than celebrating the inauguration of the Mizbeach, they light the menorah. The Haftorah that we read on Shabbos Chanukah, Chagai's contemporary Zachariah, who sees a menorah, and the menorah as a symbol explains the accompanying malach, lo b'chaya v'lo b'koach ki im bruchi amar Hashem tzvakot, that you won this war and you're going to win your wars. Not with the hundreds and thousands of chayalim, and it's not the koach, it's the ruach of achdut that we see right now in Am Yisrael. It's the tefillot, it's the chesed, it's the chalobeks, it's the tambourine misivot, it's the chasadim, it's the deliveries, it's the visitations of the soldiers, it's the singing, it's the dancing into Aza. Who dances? It's the vizos haTorah that we see on Rosh Chodesh Kislev, that the chayalim in the parliament of Aza are going to take out lo b'chayav lo b'koach ki im bruchi. That's the sign of the menorah. The Spirit of God is with you. And even in the darkest of nights, during the month of Chanukah and during this war of Mashif HaRuach, don't forget that the Ruach of Hashem is there. And that's why the Maccabim describe Ruach Hashem Tzalecha. They could feel it, like we all do today. We feel the Ruach of Hashem. The Sfatim that tells us that yes, Chanukah really is continuation of the biblical holiday of Sukkot. And just like in Sefer HaMakkabim, Yehuda Maccabi records how they came in to the Beis HaMikdash at the beginning of Tishrei, and everything was in shambles and defiled, and they couldn't properly celebrate Sukkot. So when is there still an agricultural season? Just like Chagai says, now's the time for the blossoming, not of the chitza sa'ora and gefen teina v'rimon. It's the time now, minna hayom hazeh itz hazayit avarech. It's the time of the olives. So they take olive branches instead of their palm branches to continue the celebrations that they couldn't properly celebrate on Sukkot. When else did we ever have this in history? That we couldn't celebrate Sukkot properly. We didn't finish Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, the way that we wanted to. We didn't dance the way that we wanted to. We didn't end Zman Simchatinu Baguda Achat the way that we wanted to. But don't worry. From Sukkot to Chanukat tells us the Sfat Emet, don't worry, Chanukat is the reflection of Chag HaSukkot. This is the Chag that we should be anticipating as the complement and the completion for what we can complete on Chag Simchat Torah. Oh, are we going to dance with the Torah? Oh, are we not only going to learn for 24 hours straight, but we're going to dance and sing the Simchat HaTorah this Chanukah, because we're going to celebrate Mashiv HaRuach, the victory and the restoration of the spirit of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're going to celebrate what we couldn't accomplish on Sukkot, which was the unity, the Aguda Achat, the Sukkot Shalom that now we finally have. Chanukah, says the Sfat Emet, really is a reflection of Sukkot in eschatological terms. The 8 days, the fire, the themes, the fire of Simchat Beit HaShoeva, the Hidur that we find both in the mitzvahs of Chanukah and the mitzvot of Sukkot. And therefore, we have an opportunity to complete the Simcha very soon, Ana and Chanukah. And therefore, Chanukah really is the end of Tkufat Tishrei. It's a continuation of the Hitchadshut. This is our opportunity. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, take advantage of this time. These weeks in Kislev leading up to Chanukah for Hitchadshut, for renewal. This is an opportunity to really feel that simcha, for Asa to come together b'aguda, and to realize lo b'chaya v'lo b'koach ki im b'ruchi. And that ruach, as we know, is the same ruach that Yecheskel HaNavi experiences when he sees the dry bones of, literally of the carcasses. He sees the massacre of Be'eri. He sees the dead bodies. He sees his mutilated brothers. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him, so, Am Yisrael, Yecheskel, what are you going to tell these bones? What are you going to tell? What are you going to tell the families of all the victims? Tell them, don't worry. This is a time of Mashiv HaRuach. I'm bringing my spirit back. Don't worry. It's not just, Hashem says, the physical Tchiyat HaMetim. It's not just their physical bones and their flesh that are going to be returned. You know what they really need? You know what Am Yisrael really needs to come back to life? You need Ruach. So Yecheskel, it can't just come from God. It has to come from you. It has to come from the people. Amartel HaRuach. Come, Boi HaRuach. Show Am Yisrael right now that they can come back to life. And sure enough, Yecheskel does, and he sees everyone coming back to life. And then you thought that you were secure in Eretz Yisrael the past 75 years. No, like Avraham Avinu, now's the time for Lech Lecha. Now's the time with renewed spirit. Go, Bata Ben Adam. Now it's the time to feel the restoration of the spirit that will enable us to stay, not just to live and survive, but to thrive in Eretz Yisrael. And as you know, we read this Haftorah at the time of Geula and Pesach, and in Eretz Yisrael we read it on Yom HaTzmaut. But now it has a renewed significance for us. Now we should read it right now. This is a time of Mashiv HaRuach, the time that Hashem has promised us, that the Ruach is going to be restored. And the proof is that I always learned and taught these prakim as two separate nevuot. The first part of Parak Lamed Zayin, the Ruach, Posta, the Shoah, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaTzmaut. Hashem is going to bring us back to life. And then we have another nevuah of Yecheskel taking two pieces of wood and unifying them in his hands. And I thought they were talking about two very different stages of Yemot HaMashiach, of the time period of redemption. But now we see that they're meant to coexist. They're juxtaposed because they happen at the same time. Hashem says, you want to know what's really going to bring the Ruach back? Take two sticks. Take a tree and take a branch and graft them together. And even if initially they look like achadim, they look very different, don't worry. Lo yiyu od l'shnei goyim, v'lo yachatzu od l'shtei mamlachot od. Who doesn't have chills right now? I have the chills as I say this pasuk. And not that Hashem says, you're not going to be two different people. It's not going to be the pros and the cons. It's not going to be the left and the right. You're going to be one people. And that's your Hashavat HaRuach. That's the spirit. But it's not going to come on its own. You have to remember these Chalomot, and you have to remember that it's a process. And you can't sleep through this time. Don't go to sleep tonight, and don't go to sleep tomorrow night. and at least not figuratively. Make sure that we plant from destruction. Make sure that we take advantage to infuse one another, to infuse our nation with spirit. This is a time to dream. Don't lose sight of those dreams. Keep aspiring. As Rabbi Sachs says, I know it seems that dreaming is very impractical, but it's actually very practical because people spend months planning holidays, but not even a day planning a life. But instead of dreaming, people allow themselves to be carried by winds of chance and circumstance. But we know that we shouldn't, because anytime we see Vayehi, and it came to pass, it's always miyu'ad leporanu, it's a prelude to tragedy, because it's when we passively allow things happen. We should be living our lives, planting, building, infusing ourselves with spirit. There should be a life of yehi, or let there be, a life where we make the things happen. And it's our dreams that give us that direction. And then tells a beautiful story. In the Ne'emah, he says Elie Wiesel had told him that in fact, there was a time that Sigmund Freud and Theodor Herzl lived in the same district. For a few months, they overlapped in Vienna. He says, fortunately, they never met, because can you imagine what would have happened had they met? Herzl would have said, I have a dream of a Jewish state. I'm dreaming about the state. And Freud would have said, tell me, Herzl, how long have you been having the dream? Lie down on my couch. I will analyze you. And Herzl would have been cured of his dreams, and there would be no Jewish state. But fortunately, the Jewish people have never been cured of their dreams. Let's not be cured of our dreams. Rav Kook says that this is the prelude to redemption, a time of dreams. But dreaming occurs when it's really dark, when there is a charuf, and then we have an opportunity to dream. The greatest dreams are our foundation, he says. That's why our prophets dream, our poets dream, the philosophers dream, cholmim anu. And we, the Jewish people, we have our dreams, and we have the prophecies, not just yet to be fulfilled, but the ones that we have to fulfill. We are waiting and dreaming and anticipating and building B'shuv Hashem et Shabbat Zion. And sometimes he says that life, the social tensions of life, they tend to make us forget our dreams. They make us forget the luster of what we aspire to. And ultimately, out of pain sometimes, we just give up. We instead allow ourselves simply to sink into, whether it's the fake news, whether it's the anti-Semitism, whether it's the cruel reality that we see around us. Instead of realizing that sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us suffering in order to remind us to keep dreaming, to remind us that there are dreams beyond what we see in the present. Hu be'emet hamet hayoter habayatit, and as we saw by Yaakov and Yosef, this is the true reality, because our dreams allow us to change our reality. Va'az shav chazon hachalom, v'haya lemachazeh barur. And then, when we can recognize this through our suffering, our dreams come back clearer than ever. He'el pa adabra bo, marev lo b'chidot, utmunat Hashem yabit. I can't think of a more appropriate wish than a tikvana tefillah that will keep on dreaming. I want to wish us all pleasant dreams, to change our reality, to restore the spirit, and ultimately to keep on dreaming until we see the fulfillment. B'shuv Hashem et Shabbat Zion hayinu kocholmim, az yimalei eschot pinu u'shoninu bina. If we began to learn me'afila, then Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll see the fulfillment of these dreams. La'ora.